Yes, sir. It is the Devil's Puck Luck podcast, where, of course, you know that I am always joined by the 20-year season ticket holder, one, Danny McDonough, and I am Adam Arbrecht, covering the Brooklyn Nets over the Locked On Nets podcast and your New York Football Giants on the One Giant podcast. And Danny, we come in, we've been doing some updates, some of the big signings, big returns for Timo Meyer, big additions into Foley, obviously, but there's still a lot more that's going to go on in this offseason, and we're going to break down some incoming players, some returning players, and then even some maybe still question marks around where the Devils are going to go. But you've taken a little bit of time away from the pod here.
I missed you, man. I missed you. You know, but you were on. Listen, you were on point. You were literally right then when those things were happening. I love it. You know,
you got to stand there at the ready. You know, I
love it.
I neglect a lot of people in my life just to make sure that I can talk Devils hockey. And the first thing we're going to do, the Devils in this offseason, you and I suggested that it was about just trying to increase the quality of play at certain key positions and make this team stronger. Colin Miller, 2025, fifth round pick from Dallas. Pick goes to Dallas. Player comes from Dallas. What do you feel about him bringing him into the defensive fold?
I think this is a very underrated acquisition by Fitz. Fitz has had, listen, let's preface this by saying, let's preface this by saying, how awesome is it to be a Devils fan and to have an off season that we're having right now with the draft, with the extensions, with the acquisitions via trade, you know, the Severson sign and trade. It has been phenomenal to be a Devils fan right now.
Yeah.
And I think Miller, you know, to your question, is very underrated in the sense what he can do for this team, adding that veteran presence. He's essentially an upgrade to what Brendan Smith is going to bring, right? He's going to bring that veteran presence, that physicality. He's really going to round out that top six defenseman pairing. He's going to be on the third pairing, you would assume. And he's a safety blanket for Nemec, you know, depending on what Nemec does, you know, during the season.
You mentioned Smith there when we talk about the top six. Nemec would technically be on the outside looking in on that group, with obviously Luke Hughes now getting into that fold as well. So there's a little bit of flexibility there. You like that Miller, he comes from playing with top line talent in Dallas. Now, he doesn't play in the playoffs at all this past year. He ends up being on the bench. So you kind of piece these things together and you see how it's possible for the Devils to get him. But to your point about Smith, this just feels like veteran, consistent, and someone that just pushes. We've talked about this all off season, the hedging between young talent coming up and taking their place for the future of the New Jersey Devils, but making sure you have some guys in place that you feel like, hey, if they're not ready at the start of the season, if they struggle or stumble a little bit, there's something to fall back on.
The exciting thing is that these kids, you know, the young kids, especially on defense, are going to get a shot right off the bat during training camp. You know, and having a full training camp, being able to gel as a team, we don't know how everything's going to unfold. You know, maybe Miller's outside looking in. You know, we don't know. You know, maybe Brendan Smith has a phenomenal training camp and he's in the lineup more than we expect in the beginning of the year. You know, maybe Nemec is on that third pairing right away. You know, so there's a lot of things that are going to unfold, and I don't think anybody has an idea. You know, I think we know, you know, just from seeing what's on paper, what we'd like, you know, what we expect, but listen, it's hockey. Injuries happen. You know, we know that, you know, so adding the depth obviously is great too, but it's exciting, man. The defensive core is very exciting.
Yeah. We're going to come back to not knowing about expectations and what's going to happen here at the back end of this episode. One other thing to peek behind the curtain here, when we were putting together our rundown, Danny brought up the idea that we should focus in on two players that are returning to the Devils on 2 and 1 year deals respectively. And I said, I agree with you. Let's start there. And then we went ahead and talked about Colin Miller coming in from Dallas. But no, I'm not apologizing for it. I'm just telling you that my natural instincts take over at a certain point, and I don't get bogged down with things that we agreed on. So the other news in this offseason, obviously a lot of free agents, restricted free agents, a few trades have been made, as you mentioned, by Fitzgerald in the front office. McLeod and Bastian both coming back. Bastian on a 2-year deal, McLeod on the 1-year deal. This, again, you can't let everybody go out the door. You can't keep everybody.
Sure.
How did you feel about maintaining these two particular players, knowing that a year from now it'll be a whole nother conversation again?
Yeah, you know what the great thing is a lot of people were very nervous when we didn't give qualifying offers to certain restricted free agents and they go to free agency. We knew that was going to happen because of the dollar signs, right? We knew it was going to happen because of the way the cap works and everything. And Fitz is very smart how he went about doing this. He basically went right to McLeod and right to Bastian right when they were free agents, said, this is what we want to do, you know, and the deals are great. You know, Bastian and McLeod are buddies, you know, they want to be on the line together. You see all the social media with them just being, obviously being line mates, they're going to develop that relationship. But I think Bastian is going to bring that physical presence. I think Lazar on the fourth line as well is going to bring that physical presence. But most importantly, we've been talking about it. McLeod coming back in the circle, the faceoffs is a massive key to this team. And I talked to you about it. I was a little worried. I said, if you lose McLeod in free agency, you have to find a faceoff guy that's also going to be a grinded out type of player in your bottom six.
Well, and that's what's funny about it. So when I was covering the news of Toffoli coming over, one of the great attributes is his faceoff percentage.
Absolutely.
He's been great inside the circle. But what you just mentioned there about needing a grind out guy, some toughness, that's one of the things that we really liked about McLeod, especially going into the playoffs. It just seemed like we talked about this with veterans and young talent alike. You learned things about a lot of guys going into that playoff run. And if you're the Devils, you look at McLeod and you say, oh, we learned that when it gets a little more heightened, when the game needs to be elevated, he can step up for that. And by the way, on a 1-year deal, Don't tell me that you're not going to get every single ounce of McLeod this season, right? Because whether or not it's going to be going somewhere else, or because of how well structured Fitzgerald has been with these contracts. Remember, we said the money for a lot of these guys is descending as it goes forward. That means that you could go back next year, depending on what happens with McLeod, and say, yes, we want you to still be a part of this. Not a guarantee, but you put yourself in a good position to get the most out of him and then be able to reevaluate.
Fitz works everything very well, too, with the cap, in the sense of obviously Mercer, Toffoli, and McLeod are coming off 1-year deals, basically. They both all need extensions, if they're going to stay with the Devils. But you also have to remember, too, we'll jump to it later in the episode, but with goaltending, maybe we don't go after a goalie now, but if we're one of those top 5 teams and goaltending's a little suspect mid-season and before the trade deadline, maybe we do something, and maybe we use a piece that we don't think that we're going to be able to extend. Now, listen, Mercer, I think we all can agree, is going to be a core piece of this team. And of course, you hope to keep Toffoli. But, there's a lot of what ifs.
So McLeod actually could be interesting in that regard if you're looking at needing something else, potentially goaltending specifically. That's an interesting way to think about it. Like, hey, we love you, but if you're not going to be here next year, at some point we may have to make that difficult decision.
It also depends on what Dawson Mercer does this year too, and how he develops as a player and what kind of strides he has in his point production, who his line mates are going to be. Toffoli had a phenomenal year last year too, remember. We
career highs.
Like we can't expect him to do exactly what he did last year. But to take a minute to take a step back to see what we have, Palat's on the third line. Think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
How incredible is that though?
Yeah.
The fact that you have a top 6 that's going to compete with any NHL team, it's great, and to be able to say that you have McLeod, who is one of the best faceoff guys, on your fourth line center. You have Haula, who's on your third line of center. We're phenomenal down the middle right now. I think, as Devils fans, we should be ecstatic, and it's like I said, Fitz just made the right moves. It's awesome to see.
Briefly on Bastian, are you happy with the 2-year return for him and a little bit more longevity there? You don't necessarily have to look at it the same way. Although, again, you can still look at that contract and say it's just as valuable as saying another team can have control of this player for a following season. Should anything come up along the way, though, less likely of the two.
I thought it would have been flip-flopped. I thought McLeod would have got multiple year, and I thought Bastian might have got one. I was thinking about that. But, I think it's a fair deal. I think it's a smart deal for both the player and the organization. I think that Fitz really knows how to bring this team together. And I think Bastian and McLeod wanted to stay here. I don't think they wanted to go searching elsewhere. Maybe they could have got $500,000 maybe somewhere else, Who
What's
knows?
$500,000?
What's $500,000? You know what I mean? What's $500,000? But point being is they wanted to stay here, and that was their goal all along. So it's great to see them back.
You been holding out on me?
But what?
I don't know. You said it's no big deal, $500,000.
Can you imagine just $500,000 right now? Huh? What was the first thing you do with $500,000? Maybe you shouldn't answer that.
Let's not get into it. We'll circle back to that later. So 2 more players returned to the fold. You highlighted some of the other guys that have been brought back. We know we brought in some players as well. But let's throw Colin Miller into this discussion when we turn our attention to remaining free agents that the Devils have on their roster. Restricted, Boquist, Ball, Tatar. Now, 1-to-1, Ball, young, Miller, veteran.
Yeah.
How do you look at that?
We gave Ball the qualifying offer, which I think we knew was going to happen. We knew Tatar was going to test free agency, and he's still a free agent. So there's still a chance that we might see him in the bottom 6, depending on the money.
Sure.
He's still out there. And Boquist, he's not going to be a Devil next year. He's not going to fit, unfortunately, with the organization. And you feel bad for him. He got a fair shot, but he just doesn't fit with the mold of where the Devils are going, in their 12 forward. So and listen, I love Bo. I thought he was a great player. I thought he added a lot of value in regards to just defensive play, when he was playing well. And there's going to be some holes we have to really consider on the third and fourth line in regards to defensive ability. And it goes for Sharon Govich too, losing Sharon Govich, in the trade. And basically, he was a top penalty killer when he was playing in the regular season. So, it's seeing how everybody's going to develop special teams wise, obviously losing Bruno, your coach, he's going over to, help me here, Columbus.
Yep.
So we're going to see we're going to see what's going to happen. There's a lot that's going to go on and a lot's going to unfold. And it's really exciting to go into training camp to see where everybody is going to fall into place.
Where would you put Ball if the qualifying offer's been extended, he returns to the team? How does that hierarchy shake out now with Miller in there as well, and with Smith still being there, and with Luke Hughes, and maybe Neville? Like, there's a lot of bodies coming into that room. And I guess while that's a good problem to have, I feel like if Ball comes back, something has to shake loose there.
Well, Ball's going to be on the team. He's going to be on the team. So Ball's going to be in your third defensive pairing. He's going to be, you assume, with Nemec, maybe with Luke Hughes.
Okay.
It's hard to know. So you're talking Miller and Smith out, maybe Nemec and Smith out, and it's hard to know.
Yeah. It's just fascinating to think about them being in, you walk into this room and you want to have, as we keep saying, this balance and this consistency. And when you go back to Lindy Ruff, like, hey, prepare yourselves, Devil fans.
Yeah.
Like, there's a world where, especially that, you hope it shakes out a lot in training camp, but there's a world where you get to the regular season and there's still going to be some of that Lindy Ruff magic, just mixing and matching pairings to try to figure out what makes the most sense, especially when you think about having young players. Because I think there is that going to be still that trajectory over the first month of the season where
did Brunette go? He went to Nashville. Why am I losing my mind? I'm sorry, guys.
He got there. Yeah.
I don't know what's happening. I apologize for that, but sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, but it's just it's that thing of not knowing, you know what Luke Hughes can be. Let's confirm what he is. You think you know what what young players are going to be. Or even, by the way, Colin Miller, like, you think you know what you're getting in an experienced veteran. As long as he confirms that, then it makes sense. So much about what the Devils have done this offseason, to me, is speaking to saying, we had talent this past year, but not all the pieces fit together correctly. That's what we tried to do, is get pieces that complement one another more successfully, so you don't get, you talked about this last time, where you don't get these, we don't want 6-game losing streaks while we figure out a kink. We want to feel like we have that all the way through.
And that's the maturation of these younger kids, this core, coming into the season, knowing that, listen, the threshold of what you can become is on the table. The expectations are so much higher than what they were last year.
That's right.
They're so much higher than what they were last year. And I look at it like this, right? I get a little nervous when it comes to what the expectations are as younger kids. That are they going to be so like into that moment where they're like, we're going to be this good. And then, listen, you go into the season, the NHL is crazy. You don't know what teams and how teams are going to be structured going into it. I'm fully confident. And let me just preface it by saying that I'm fully confident. I think the Devils are a playoff team. I think they're going to be I think they're going to be 2 in the Metro again. I'm going to say that. I think they're going to be 2 in the Metro. I think that they very easily can win the Metro, but I still think Carolina is a force to reckon with.
I like, to your point, I think everything happened the way you wanted it to this past season. You made the playoffs. You beat your rivalry in the Rangers. You got really valuable experience. You confirmed some things about different players, and you still left a lot of guys really hungry, right? Like, you still have this, like, after that incredible season, we only got to the second round of the playoffs. Like, whether you thought that was going to happen going into the year, now it did. So now this team gets to come back a little bit hungry.
Let me ask you a question. We were at the playoff games against the Rangers,
That's
right? That atmosphere, just to have that back for this Devils team, it felt, and we joked around about this. We felt that was like our Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah.
Because there was so much hype and so much emotion behind it. And just as a fan, you were so heavy into it. And then you go to the Carolina series, and you're down 2-0, and you're just like,
And there's so much about that, and we talked about it, and we'll continue to talk about it. There's so much about that just like for the fan base, that there was like an emotional letdown, because there's such a relief. There's an elation of you beat the Rangers. It felt like a conference finals playoff series. And then you go back and go, 7 more games. That's right. Well, it turns out it wasn't going to be 7 more games, but you need that to have that sense of how long the playoffs are
Yes.
and how you need to find a way to win a 7-game series and still keep yourself on that same level for the next
I want
round.
to pose a question to you. It has to be on a lot less money.
Okay.
Vladimir Tarasenko.
Well, that's interesting.
Vladimir Tarasenko, right?
Yeah.
Patrick Kane. You think about it. He was linked to Carolina, obviously. Tarasenko. It didn't happen. Can he be on a short-term deal with the Devils?
Well,
1-year deal?
Well, you mentioned about Kane, and it's like maybe
I don't want Kane.
No, but no. It's like maybe he could, but what are you? I think there's still uncertainty to what that means, right? So you can get excited about that, but I don't know if the Devils. Again, I don't think the Devils want this could be, but it also could not be, right?
Yeah,
and that's a variable.
It was the what ifs. I see him going to Ottawa. I just see him as a center. I think he'd be a good fit. I don't think it's going to happen. It was funny. I love going on social media and actually seeing all these scenarios going through Devils fans' brains. It's kind of interesting. But to me, it's we go to who the free agents are out there. Maybe the older veteran going, to be on the bottom six, like an Adam Henrique coming in. It's interesting to see if we make another splash in the market, with a bottom six player. And it'd also be interesting to see if Tatar doesn't get a deal, as a free agent, does he come back to the Devils, or does Fitz go to Tuna and say, listen, you still have a place on this team as a grinded out type of player, and your role is going to be different. You're going to be on the third and fourth line. You're going to be with Halla, or you're going to be with, if Lazar's not in the lineup, with McLeod and Bastian. Those are things that are very interesting, because we have $4.5 million in cap space about. So it's going to be interesting to see what other moves are going to be made.
Coming up here in a second, we're just going to round out this episode talking about the goaltending and why Danny and I were 100% correct and how the Devils were going to approach this offseason. But I will say, if you're Tatar and the market isn't quite there, and Fitz says, well, we got a place for you as this grind out role, I could see him going somewhere else to say, I'll go for a 1 year where I have a better role, a bigger role, and a better chance to establish myself. Okay, so the last then note here, you and I talked about this, Devils fans have talked about this. What are they going to do in between the pipes? You've got Vitek, you've got Schmitty, you're excited about what the young player could do. You maybe aren't as excited about what Vitek showed you in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. But the first thing, before we even talk about the name that was brought in, was that you and I said you improve the play in front of the goaltending, and you believe that that can help alleviate the pressure and help the performances. Do you think that this team at this point right now has done that in front of the goaltending to say they should be able to be more successful? If they went right back into the playoffs now again, the defensive performances would be stronger and more consistent?
Yes and no, right? It's great that our defensive core is a lot younger. There's a bright future ahead, but at the same time, you worried about their maturation as players. Sure. Are they going to be able to jump in this season and be those shut it down defensive guys that are going to relieve some of the pressure on Vitek, on Akira? They both had phenomenal seasons too, Vitek and Akira. Sure. We just saw obviously Vanacek struggle in the playoffs, and obviously Schmid being, left wide open with defensive lapses. It's like you said, Luke Hughes, you wanted him from the jump in the playoffs, and there was a huge argument for it, and you're not wrong.
And there's some small samples against it.
Right. Yeah, you saw how phenomenal Luke Hughes is going to be. You also saw some of the defensive breakdowns. And being such a young core, it kind of makes you consider the argument of bringing in a Gibson, bringing in that veteran goaltender that is going to be extremely solid on those defensive breakdowns, that the young players are going to make. They're inevitably going to make them. It's part of the process, part of the learning process. But it's a great question to have, right? And it's a great debate to have, is are we strong enough with the defensive core growing throughout the season to make those mistakes that you can rely, just as you did during the regular season with Akira and Vitek?
And so, while Gibson could be a name, the name is actually going to be Erik Kallgren, who comes in on, a veteran player, 27 years old, has, go to the numbers here, friends, an 11-6-5 career record, 21-22 and 22-23 season. He gave you 3.31, gave you 2.67, and save percentages 8.88 and 8.98. He's in the beer there. He replaces Blackwood, right?
Yeah, it's what you said exactly before the episode. Yeah.
This is just us taking a victory lap.
Yeah.
Everyone knew or felt like Blackwood was going to be gone. This, to me, at least in this moment, speaks to the idea of the Devils are going back with Vitek. They're going back with Schmid. And now you have another player in Kallgren who can come into the fold like Blackwood and hopefully be a better contributor inside of that rotation.
100%, because we always talk about health and players staying healthy. You know, obviously Blackwood was the goaltender that was always injured. By the way, congratulations to Blackwood getting that deal in San Jose.
Of course.
Good for him. A little aside, congratulations to Miles Wood. 6 years, $2.5 million with Colorado. That's a story for another day. I don't even know how that happened. I was so shocked.
It's longevity, man.
I know Colorado needed that, that bruiser in their forward core, but I was so shocked. But good for him.
Yeah, I mean, listen, when you disrespect somebody all season long, it's really weird that you congratulate him going out the door. You know what I mean? It's the old, don't spit in my face and tell me it's raining.
What did I say? What did I say to you, though? I was like, 2 years at 1.25 a year, I'd consider bringing him back. 6 years at $2.5 million. Kudos, Miles Wood, to your agent, and good luck in Colorado, man. We're gonna miss you. We're gonna miss you as the person you were and how you played as a Devil. You sucked at times, but listen.
Wow.
But listen. Congratulations to him. That's a great deal in Colorado.
At the end of the day, it feels like right now at least, and we'll continue to watch the goaltending situation because that is the great debate.
Yeah.
Are the Devils now, with the moves they're making, on the precipice of going and getting that goaltender like Gibson, like you're speaking to, or are they saying we believe that we've made these marginal improvements and we're willing to go into this upcoming season and see how the young core and some new veterans mixed in with familiar faces, how they're all going to come together? I think you can still walk into this year as currently constituted and, to your point, have the same level of high expectations around this team, wanting them to be maybe 2 in the Metro, competing for it, obviously. That's the expectation. So I just, the big swing does elevate expectations, and I'm not against it, but I still keep coming back to, why don't you let Luke Hughes and Nemec and the young players, and McLeod even come back on the 1-year deal, or all these guys, and Jack Hughes, frankly, right? Listen, Jack Hughes was next world incredible, set franchise records. And I say this with nothing but absolute love and adoration for him. I want him to do more, right? I want him to do more, and there's more for his game to be. He can become one of the, and he already is, but he can become a guy that you look at and say, oh, you want top 5 players in the NHL. Like, that is inside of him.
He got 7 in Hart, right? He was 7 in Hart. He can be top 3.
Exactly. So there is still more for his game as well. All of that to say, it's man, keep getting more and more excited, and also keep having that level of patience to allow this to unfold kind of organically. And to go back to the top, the praise we were giving, as everyone should be, to Fitzgerald. It comes back to, guess what? I kind of trust the GM to make the right decisions here, which is always a relief, dude. Any sport, a Giants fan, when it was Dave Gettleman at the helm, there was only the assumption that whatever he did, it was a massive mistake, right?
Yeah.
So that changes how you look at moves and how you feel about your team.
I'm a Mets fan. I've been through some GMs, man.
I can't solve a lifelong problem, man. Not in one episode. As we said, we're going to be covering this all off season long. We're going to continue to be breaking down some other things. You mentioned Mercer in this episode. We still haven't gotten to setting the bar of expectations for a young player like that who should be critical to the core. So I think what we're even going to do, I haven't told Danny about this, but I think going back and looking at some of the best games for players this past season, and then some of the roughest ones, right? Going back into these playoffs and seeing where players can make improvements, and maybe even explain why certain guys were back, like we say with McLeod, versus guys that were allowed to go into free agency, right? So it's going to be a lot of fun. But the only way you do that, go ahead.
You know what we should do? We should do, like, each episode just have an extremely high point of season of last year and an extremely low point. That's good.
Peaks and valleys.
Yeah. There's some studying to do there.
There's a journey, and you can be a part of it if you're over on YouTube following the Devil's Puck Luck podcast, if you're following at Adam Armbrecht, at Danny the Face, if you're following at Devil's Puck Luck on Instagram, and if you're following, I know, eventually I'm going to get the name changed, but it's NJ Devils PL on Twitter. Those are all the places that you can find us. We could have some potentially really exciting news coming up over the course of this offseason as well. And it's all tied back to people watching and engaging with us and supporting us as we continue to grow this. So we always appreciate it. And we'll be back next time. Just like Toffoli, we be on a rollie.
I think you're just going to come over to me every time.